Just wait a moment. Let everybody join in. Appreciate each of you who have been interested in our ongoing series here at Looking Forward Live Faith, Feelings, and Mental Health. It feels like we've been getting a really good response from so many of you through email and through your messages. So, again, want to thank each of you for your feedback. We'll go ahead and get started tonight. Again, this is a Looking Forward Live Faith, Feelings, and Mental Health series. Tonight, we've entitled this, You Are Allowed to Be Human. This is about emotions, weakness, grief, anger, and doubt that are not spiritual failures. So let's go ahead and get this kicked off. So, again, welcome to Looking Forward Live. Tonight, we're continuing our conversation about faith, feelings, and mental health with the topic, You Are Allowed to Be Human. Now, I know that phrase may sound simple, but for many people, it's deeply difficult to believe. Some of us grew up with the idea that being spiritual meant being untouched by ordinary human emotions. We thought faith meant never feeling anxious, never feeling angry, never feeling tired, never questioning, never grieving too deeply, and never admitting to any weaknesses. But tonight I want to challenge that, not because faith doesn't matter, but because healthy faith should help us become more whole and not less human. So the goal is not to become a polished religious machine. The goal is to become honest, grounded, compassionate, and integrated people. So tonight we're going to talk about emotions, about weakness, about grief, anger, doubt, rest, and the parts of ourselves we often feel pressured to hide. So I want to say from the start that your humanity is not a spiritual defect. It is the place where grace actually meets you. This matters because many people are exhausted, but they feel guilty admitting it. They're tired, they're grieving, they're often anxious, angry, confused, or burnt out. But they believe those feelings somehow prove that they're not spiritual enough. So they hide, they smile, they keep serving, they keep showing up, they keep trying to be strong, but inside they may be breaking down. Religious spaces sometimes unintentionally reward performance. We reward the person who always says yes, always seems fine, always gives, always believes correctly, and never appears to be needy. But Jesus does not begin with performance. He says, Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. That invitation matters. The Gospels don't present Jesus saying, Come to me after you've cleaned yourself up emotionally. He, 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 he does not say, Come to me once you stop feeling so much. He says, Come weary, come burdened, come actually as you are. Healing begins when the whole person is allowed to come into the room. So let's talk a minute about spiritual perfectionism. Spiritual perfectionism is the belief that faith should make us flawless, unaffected, and emotionally invulnerable. It sounds like this: I should not feel this. If I had more faith, I wouldn't be struggling. Good Christians shouldn't, good Christians should always be okay. My needs make me selfish, or I should be stronger than this. But over and again, the scriptures Christian scriptures we find in the New Testament gives us a very different picture when the Apostle Paul says we have this treasure in jars of clay. That means the treasure is real, but the vessel is fragile. We're not made of steel and we're not made of machines. We are embodied, we are limited, we are emotional, and we are relational beings. A jar of clay can hold treasure and still be breakable. That gives us a very powerful image. It means weakness does not cancel sacredness. Fragility does not cancel faith. Struggle does not mean the treasure is absent. Sometimes the most faithful thing we can do is stop pretending that we're not human. One of the strongest reasons we can say humanity is not a spiritual failure is in the incarnation itself. Christian faith confesses that Jesus was fully human. He didn't merely appear to be human, he entered real human life, experienced fatigue, he experienced hunger, grief, friendship, betrayal, anger, anguish, and tears. We see this again throughout the gospel accounts, where Jesus is found weeping at the tomb of Lazarus. He withdrew when he needed solitude. He expressed anger at injustice and hypocrisy. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he's overwhelmed with sorrow. And even on the cross, cries out, questioning God the Father. Again, we're often told, "Well, don't question God. There's a reason for everything." Well, no, there, there's a time when questions are fine. They need to be asked. So if Jesus could weep, then tears are not unspiritual. If Jesus could withdraw, then rest is not selfish. If Jesus could feel anguish, then pain is not proof of a weak faith. If Jesus could be angry at what harms people, then anger itself is not automatically sinful. So the question is not whether we have emotions. The question is whether we can bring them into the light with honesty and with wisdom. Unfortunately, though, many people are taught to distrust emotions completely. But emotions are part of how we process life, and they're extremely vital, extremely important for who we are. They're not always accurate, uh, they're not always commands, but they're often meaningful signals that something's going on. Fear may signal danger or uncertainty, where anger may signal a violated boundary or maybe injustice. Sadness may signal loss. We've talked about this before: loss of relationships, loss of people in our lives, loss of jobs, loss of meaningful things that we've clung to. There can be lots of reasons that we could be sad. And again, this is signaling some sort of loss. Anxiety may signal overload or threat or some unresolved stress. A mature response is not to obey every emotion blindly, but it is also not mature to ignore every emotion and just call that faith. As if we can just bury all that beneath everything else and we'll just say, we'll just be faithful, we'll not worry about it. So I think a better question here is, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What is attached to it? What does my body believe is happening? What's my nervous system telling me? Is this feeling connected to something current, or is it touching something old, something from the past? Faith can help examine emotions with compassion and discernment. Doesn't require us to pretend that they're not real or that they're not there, they're not happening. Uh, Paul tells us in Ephesians 4:26, be angry and don't sin. So there's times to be angry. You can be angry. That doesn't automatically mean something that you do is wrong because you feel anger. Feeling something is not wrong. Sometimes the action can be wrong, but the feeling is not something wrong. Again, it's signaling something is going on. So we got to understand that weakness is one of the hardest things for many of us to accept, especially if we grew up being praised for being strong, if we praised for being helpful, for being the responsible one, for being so spiritual, or just being self-sacrificing. If we had praise heaped upon us for this, then it's hard for us to accept the fact that weakness isn't failure. Limits are a part of being a human person, a human being. You need sleep, you need support, you need rest, you need recovery. You can't carry everyone and everything alone. It's not selfish to admit that. It's just reality. That's just how we're made. Uh, Paul prayed for his weakness to be removed, but he was told that my grace is sufficient for you. We find this in 2 Corinthians 12:9. It said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Because again, this is just illustrating how fully human that we are. Because again, we need our faith to sort of guide us and help us mature and see where we can go from here. So that's not romanticizing suffering. So we're not trying to romanticize the whole notion of suffering or some kind of martyrdom, but it means grace meets us in the place where we can't pretend to be self-sufficient. So let's repeat this again. When Paul says that he got this answer of that God's grace is sufficient and that his power is made perfect in weakness, this is not romanticizing suffering at all. It means that grace meets us in the place where we cannot pretend to be self-sufficient. There's grace in the fact that you can be honest and say, I cannot hold this up by myself. Sometimes we resist weakness because we think it makes us less useful to people or to God or whatever we might think. But often weakness is where illusion breaks. It's where pride softens, and it's where compassion grows. It's where we learn that we're loved, not because we're just so endlessly productive, but because that we're the fact that we're loved. You're allowed to have limits. That's okay. You can have limits. That's fine. Grief is one of the most human experiences we can have. We grieve death, of course, but we also grieve lost relationships, lost trust, lost innocence, lost dreams, lost structures of faith. Some of us have been through various church traditions that some didn't make sense to us anymore. Where some people find value in some of these more traditional structures, that's fine. Find your value in it. But for those of us that didn't find the value in it, we had to find others things that made sense within faith. Some of us have lost family systems. Me being a foster parent and an adoptive parent, I understand that. And I understand how this can be. And family systems can be varied. or we can leave versions, we can lose versions of ourselves that we thought this is who we are. But we've experienced a different kind of death and resurrection where we're not who we thought we would be, but we become something hopefully better. And we've learned lessons and the things that we used to be so passionate about, we may have different interests and passions now because as we grow older, these things change. Some people feel guilty for grieving because they think faith should make them feel okay right away and in every thing that happens in life. But again, we've talked about this some before too. The Bible gives us language for lament. So that's the advantage, at least in faith, you have language that you can put to this that helps you process it. The Psalms, as we say, are full of these laments and full of these questions where the psalmist is angry about the things that are going on in the world that don't make sense, all the injustice in the world. He's, angry with why God is letting this happen, or, why is life so unfair sometimes? That's why you see in Psalms where it says, "How long, O Lord?" They bring sorrow and anger and confusion and longing before God. Uh, that means lament is not unbelief. Lament is truth spoken in relationship. So when people are not allowed to grieve, they often become numb. They become angry or anxious or stuck. Healing often begins, or healing often requires mourning what was real, not minimizing it, not spiritualizing it away, not saying everything happens for a reason before someone has even had room to breathe. I've experienced this before, and others can give you that of just being in the funeral home of someone who is very close to you. Something has just ripped your heart away. It's not time to spiritualize something. It's time to maybe just let somebody have room to breathe and grieve and process this. If you're not allowed to grieve, uh, you know, there's no way to get anywhere. You just become numb. But you're allowed to grieve. Your sadness doesn't make you faithless. Again, it just makes you a human being. Next, we'll talk about how anger is complicated because anger can do harm. We all know that. Anger can become rage, it can become contempt. Anger can bring about cruelty, revenge. Anger can even be about control. But the answer is not to pretend that anger doesn't exist. Suppressed anger often turns into resentment, bitterness, shame, or just being here in the South, we're just passive aggressive. Anger may reveal harm. It can, again, reveal injustice. It can reveal that your boundaries have been violated. It may reveal that something precious needs protection. So the wisdom question is not how do I never feel anger? The question is what is this anger protecting? What truth is underneath it? What would repair look like? And then what would a response look like that is honest but not destructive? The letter of James we find in the New Testament, James says to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. That doesn't mean never be angry. It means that anger needs wisdom, patience, and discernment. You're allowed to feel anger because that's what you're going to feel because you're a human being. You're also responsible for what you do with it. Next, many people have been taught that doubt is dangerous, shameful, or even rebellious. But doubt is often more complex than that. What doubt can do sometimes, doubt can signal growth. It can signal grief. It may signal intellectual honesty. It may signal that a person has outgrown simplistic answers. It may signal that pain has made old explanations feel inadequate. As I said, many of us grew up in traditions where certainty and certain answers made sense. But as we got older or we explored bigger questions in life, those answers didn't fit. And again, it's not that you're throwing rocks at the old traditions or the old answers. For some people, that makes perfect sense. They're satisfied with the answers they have. But for some of us who we have bigger questions and we want to understand things about life, sometimes you outgrow and you begin to doubt some of this old certainty. So then you step out into a place you haven't been. That's the natural progression in all of scripture where you go out into the wilderness and you grow, and that's how you learn these lessons is in the wilderness. It doesn't tell you to never go out there. Um, Questions aren't the same thing as rebellion. Sometimes questions are the doorway to a much more mature faith. In in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, a man cries out, I believe, help my unbelief. That's one of the most honest prayers in Scripture. It's not polished, it's not perfectly certain, it's mixed because it's very human. Many of us live in that mixture. We believe, but we struggle. We hope, but we doubt. We love whatever ideas of God that we have, but we still have all these questions. A faith that cannot survive honest questions often becomes very fragile, but a faith that can bring questions into light may become deeper, humbler, and hopefully much more compassionate. It's easy in religious settings to talk as if people are just souls with obligations, but we are embodied persons. Stress lives in the nervous system. Trauma can teach the body to stay on high alert. Shame can tighten the chest, disturb sleep, disrupt appetite, and keep the body in a state of threat. This is why healing is not only about thinking better thoughts, it's also about safety, it's about rest, it's about movement, it's about relationships, and learning how to calm the body. So sometimes a person is not being rebellious, they're just dysregulated. Sometimes they're not being spiritually cold, they're exhausted. Sometimes they don't need another lecture, they don't need another revival sermon, they don't need to be told, uh, that they need to get back in line. They just need some safety, they need rest, they need nourishment, and a place where their body can stop bracing for impact. Your body is not an enemy of your spiritual life, it's part of your life. Care for the body is not a distraction from faith, it's part of whole person care. Next, shame is one of the forces that keeps people from being human. Shame says, Hide. Hide that. Don't admit to it. Don't let anyone see you. If they knew the real you, they would reject you. Or shame says, well, God's disappointed in you. You're just way too much. Or maybe you're just not enough. Grace, thankfully, says something different here. Grace doesn't deny the truth. Grace creates enough safety for truth to be faced. So compassion is not the same as excuse making. It is the posture that says, I can look honestly at my life without contempt. I can take responsibility without self hatred. I can tell the truth without collapsing into shame. So the goal here is integration. That means bringing more of the self into light, the hurting parts, the angry parts of ourselves, the grieving parts of ourselves, the parts that are afraid, the doubting parts, and even the hopeful parts. Because again, a human being is made up of all these different things. It's all who we are. And that's why it's more helpful to integrate these parts of ourselves. So you don't need to heal by cutting off your humanity. You heal by bringing your humanity into grace and truth. This is the only way it can be done. All right, so I try to give you some tools each week, and again, I want to offer you just a few practices to help you become a little more whole. And we often say this, but we say, name what you feel without judging it first. So name what you feel. Before you say I shouldn't feel this way, try saying, I notice that I'm feeling angry, or I notice that I'm feeling afraid, or I'm feeling sad. Secondly, pray honestly, not performatively. God is not helped by our pretending. Again, the Psalms show real prayer that includes pain, confusion, frustration, and longing. So it's okay. That's why I say the Psalms are so important because it gives that raw humanity that is not someone denying their spirituality or their faith. It's embracing all of that. Thirdly, ask what what this feeling is protecting or revealing. Anger might protect a boundary. Sadness might be protecting or revealing a loss. Anxiety can be revealing your overload, and fear just might be revealing your need for safety. So, a good thing to do is rest before your body forces you to stop. Many people wait until breakdown before they give themselves permission to rest. And I've seen it way too many times. Here, lastly, seek safe relationships. If you're with people that are constantly judgmental or they act like, well, you've obviously done something to make God mad or God's disappointed in you or the church is mad at you, and all this, it's nice to have relationships where healing can happen because healing can come from friends or family who are willing to hear what's going on without shaming you, without trying to control you, or without trying to rush you to get through whatever you're going through. Now, these practices are not about becoming self absorbed, but they're about at least becoming honest enough to start the healing process. We always do some reflection questions each time we do one of these sessions, and this is no different. I'd like for you to be thinking about this as you've listened to the lesson and to this session. Maybe some things you can think about is what part of being human have I been taught to hide? Because if we've come up in some sort of religious tradition, have all been taught to hide something, whether We've been verbally told that, or maybe it was just an unconscious thing, part of the culture of the church. Some of us grew up in very hyper conservative or legalistic traditions, where others were more moderate. That can happen. Maybe some things were said or unsaid. And then, what emotion do I judge most harshly in myself? Do I judge myself anytime I get angry or I'm anxious or I feel scared of something or fearful? What's the one emotion that you judge yourself most harshly and you say, I just shouldn't feel that way? And then, where do I confuse strength with